Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to follow up on that, I referenced this in my opening statement, but in New Hampshire, USDA has frozen an $11 million RCPP award for the Connecticut River Conservancy. It's a project that has leveraged public-private partnerships for critical ecosystem restoration across the watershed. And unfortunately, the months-long delay has slowed seasonal work, and it's driven up the costs of the project. Given that it's been more than 3 months since the administration froze this program, when will USDA release the funding?
What is the name of it again?
It's an RCPP award for the Connecticut River Conservancy, and we're happy to follow up with whoever the appropriate person is. And just to follow up on that, one of the things, as we know, that Congress did at the end of last year was to pass disaster funding. That included $220 million as a set-aside for small farms in the 6 New England states plus Hawaii and Alaska. And we've got apple growers in New Hampshire who in 23 lost about 90% of their crop. Virtually all stone crops were wiped out in that season. They've been waiting desperately for the funding to be released from that emergency supplemental. Senator Tillis and I sent you a letter back in March emphasizing the need to get this assistance out. So again, along the lines of Senator Collins' question, can you provide an update for when the remaining funds will be released and how we will ensure that the funding goes particularly to the small farms in states like New Hampshire, where they are desperately in need of some assistance?
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that. The ECAP funding, the economic assistance, of course, we were given a statutory deadline of March 21st, I believe, when y'all passed that or when it was passed in late last year. I think March 16th or March 17th, the portal opened, and it's a 3-day turnaround in most cases. I think we've already moved out. I don't have the number in front of me, but of the $10 billion, almost $8 billion. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. So we've actually moved almost all of that money out in, I would argue, record speed, but maybe there have been a few that we haven't, so please let us follow up on that. I've got right in front of me, Madam Chairman, that in your state, we have moved out $395 million just into New Hampshire to 17,476 of your producers in New Hampshire. So I think we've done pretty well on that. But again, if there are instances where you are not hearing those stories and that it hasn't moved as quickly as we believe it has, please let us know and we'll run that down. On the disaster relief part of it, which is the additional $20 billion, in the coming weeks by the end of May, that portal will open also. Obviously, as part of that $20 billion, there was specific funding for the Mexican water issue in Texas, and then, of course, up in the Northeast where you are, and then I believe Alaska was the third specific instance. But we're working with governors across the country. That was a little more complicated than the ECAP, the disaster or the emergency relief payments, but we're really close, and within a matter of days or weeks, certainly by the end of this month, that money will begin moving as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. As you know, farming is very different in New England than it is in the Midwest and many states in the West, and anything that we can do to be helpful in terms of getting information from our farmers to make sure that they qualify for those programs, please.
Absolutely.
Work with us.
Yes.
I also serve on the Foreign Relations Committee, and one of the things that the FY26 budget request eliminates is the Food for Peace program and the McGovern-Dole Food for Education program. In 2023, those programs provided over 1.1 million metric tons of U.S.-grown commodities to people abroad. For weeks earlier this year, more than 550 metric tons of U.S.-grown rice, peas, wheat, beans, super cereal, and ready-to-use therapeutic food sat at risk of spoilage in ports, on ships, and in warehouses across the world because of the dismantling of USAID. We're tracking that more than 350 metric tons of mixed commodities from American farmers are either pending purchase or will not be purchased this year due to the administration's terminations and delays. So can you talk about what you're saying to farmers to address this and how we're replacing that food that is so desperately needed by people around the world?
Yeah, I'll talk briefly about the McGovern-Dole program first. And I think it's important to realize that that is a $240 million program, but our numbers show only about $37 million of that is directly tied to agriculture, which of course is what I'm focused on. So as we are looking to realign the government, to reorganize, to make it more efficient for the American taxpayer, looking at programs like McGovern-Dole, which obviously all these government programs have a very worthy mission statement with very wonderful intentions, but at the end of the day, are they serving the American taxpayer who is funding them, and are we providing and meeting the metrics of what the original intent was? And without knowing all the details of the McGovern-Dole program, for example, the fact that of a $240 million program, only $37 million is being used regarding commodities, our American farmer commodities. And I don't say $37 million isn't a big number, and especially for our farmers and our ranchers, but I think in the context of what the effort is to ensure that everything we're doing is aligned with the best and highest use of taxpayer dollars, and understanding that the layers of bureaucracy and the administration and all of the money going to lots of other places other than our ag community, that we need a wholesale reapproach to all of it. And that's what, and I realize Senator will agree to disagree on this, but that's what President Trump's vision is. And while we're going through, it's never easy to change the status quo. The easiest thing for us to do is just say, oh, it's great, and we don't want to make anyone mad, and let's just keep moving forward and keep adding money to the programs. This is what I believe the voters asked for, and we'll continue to have these discussions. So I hear you. It is something we're looking at every day, and the Food for Peace program as well. But programs like McGovern-Dole, it's time to really take a deep look and see what we're spending the money on and if it's being effective.
I'm out of time, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I think most of us would agree that examining the programs and being more efficient and effective is something that we all support.
Sure.
But when we do it in a way that allows millions of tons of food and medicine to rot because we've cut off funding to ensure that that goes where it's supposed to go, that is not efficient and effective. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I just wanted to clarify what Senator Murray and I think we were asking you about with respect to the WIC program, which, as you pointed out, is not mentioned at all in the skinny budget. And what also is not mentioned is the cash value benefit for fruits and vegetables. So what we wanted to know from you is whether you would fully support fully funding WIC, including that cash benefit.
If you don't mind, I'd like to take a good look at it. Since it wasn't in this particular round, I haven't spent the time on it. But obviously, this administration believes that WIC is very important. Secretary Kennedy and I have had conversations about it pretty extensively already. So the more that I can learn and be in contact with y'all, I would welcome that.
We would appreciate your getting back to us on whether you support both aspects of the WIC program. The other thing I just wanted to clarify is I wasn't quite clear where you got the numbers of money that has gone out to New Hampshire and number of recipients, because when we checked the online dashboard, New Hampshire's received $24,000 only of the $10 billion in economic disaster assistance that was provided in the December supplemental, and the dashboard states that 51 applications have been approved. So I'm not sure where those numbers came from, but they're a lot higher than any numbers I've ever heard related to the agricultural sector in New Hampshire. So,
you know what, Senator, my apologies. It looks like there was a typo on your you and South Dakota are exactly the same on this sheet, and we know that those are two very different states. So my sincere apologies. This is unacceptable. It will not happen again, and we'll make sure and get it right. And today we will follow up. Now, I don't know.
Thank you. And actually,
up to date.
The numbers are not as big a concern for me as making sure that the funding goes to the
Yes,
people who
ma'am.
need it in New Hampshire. That's the concern.
We will follow up with your team today on that and make sure you have the up-to-date numbers.
Yeah, and I can add there, again, I think that's weather-related, which you'll have coming out. We put a number of different components in there.
Right.
So I think, Senator Shaheen, correct me if you're wrong, you just want to make sure in that weather component, they're cognizant of the language you talked about with the allocation specifically regarding small farms. Is that right?
Well, the $220 million set aside for the
Yeah.
8 states
For New England.
is a concern. But
Yes.
the other concern is the halt on funding and the applications that have been submitted for all of the assistance programs. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get
Thank
direct
you,
information
Mr.
back
Chairman.
on that.